And it's exciting now to have two generations with me. I'm going to interview them today, interviewing Roger and Violet Dilsner and Jonathan, their son in law, and Stephanie. Great to have you guys with us. Thank you. Thank you so much. Um, so, we're going to talk. Uh, about two generations and how they have learned to give. Next week, we'll be talking about in our services, This is FAM, continuing that series and talking about financial management uh, in that time. And it's also Generosity Week, so you're going to help us just think about generosity this weekend. So I was raised in a Christian home and had the advantage, I think, of learning how to give just by watching dad and mom and how they handled finances and how they responded in church services to offering times. You guys have a story too about how you learned to give. So why don't you dive in, Vi, and just tell us about how you learned to give?
Well, I grew up on a farm and went to a small country church. And I guess my first experience in giving was I was kind of frightened into it. Um, my mom told me that I can't remember what it was. My dad had sold some land or some cattle or something and hadn't given money to the church, and a large cow died. And that was because my dad hadn't given. And I was quite frightened by that. So later, she taught me that I worked with her at the town office and the library for $1 a day and to give 10 cents of that to God. And we always gave our fruits and vegetables from the garden we brought it to the Thanksgiving display at church, and we always had to
Most
bring.
churches used to do that.
Yeah,
Somehow we've got away from that. So
yeah, it was always the biggest potatoes that we had, the biggest pumpkins, the biggest carrots, and I was always sad to give away the big carrots with all the cool shapes, but
I never really took the vegetables home. I took the pies home. But
oh, okay. Yeah.
great story. Uh, my good friend David Wells says the church we serve in is the church that guilt built. So we guilted a lot of people into a lot of things. Is your story similar, Roger? Were you guilted into learning to give?
Partially, maybe a little bit more liberal guilting than Violet had, but you're going to get kind of four generations, I guess, of experience here because my I went to church with my grandparents and my parents,
Beautiful.
and I actually didn't know that people didn't tithe until I was later in life. It was just something that my parents and my grandparents did. You always set aside a portion of what you made for God. And where you had a little
A tithe being a tenth
a
is kind of
tenth,
how we
a
use the
tenth,
word.
a
Yeah.
tenth, and where you had some wiggle room was with your offering. I remember my grandpa Myers. He sort of had this thing for his offering. His tithe was, that was unquestionable, but with his offering, he'd reach in his wallet and wouldn't look and pick something up to see what God wanted him to give. And if the bill was too big, he'd put it back in and just give God a second chance, just to make sure that that was he really wanted him to give the 20 or whatever the bigger bill was. But as we got older and Violet and I got married, we both with similar upbringings. We started giving, even though we weren't making a lot of money. When we first got married, we were making, I'm pretty sure less than the average Canadian household income, but we still gave faithfully. And I have to say that early giving and that pattern of generosity that we established really is what I would say established our sort of success through life. Even though God's blessed us a lot later in life, really He blessed us, I think, more when we were younger and had very little, but still were faithfully giving. I'm a numbers guy, and I have trouble making the math work when we first got married because, we were able to buy a house, we were able to buy a car, we were able to travel as much as we wanted to travel. We were able to pay our house off. We never had to borrow money for anything else, and we had a lot more than I had ever expected. And It was out of very little, and I have trouble understanding how that math actually worked, but it did. And God's math is a good math, and that pattern of generosity that we established early on in life, I think, is really what led to sort of future success for us.
Yeah, Proverbs 11, verse 25, Contemporary English Version. Generosity will be rewarded. So, Jonathan, you're not a Dilsner. You're an Nauru. And so we'll hear your story because she might be a bit more connected to that. So tell us how you learned to give. So.
I think probably the biggest thing that stands out to me was watching my parents very consistently. Like, I can remember this all the way through my childhood, through my teenage years. Every single, probably a month or 2 weeks, but every time there would be a check in the offering. I never knew how much it was. It was always folded in half. Sometimes when we were kids, they would give it to one of us to put in for them, but it was a very, very consistent pattern. And I think I didn't really understand, watching that as a child, but now looking back at that had a very big impact on me, and it was something I didn't even think about when I started working and bringing home a paycheck. I started tithing right away, and that was just expected. Like, there wasn't anything else to do with it. So it was really good like that, and I am glad that my parents taught me that.
What's your story, Stephanie?
So I grew up with them as parents, and and that was good. You guys always gave me a little bit of change as a kid to get to drop in the offering plate when it came around. And in Sunday school, they had these things called Mac eggs, where it was like a missions for kids, where
You're really old. If you remember Mac eggs.
I do. I feel like it wasn't always my money in them, but the act of having these eggs and like all the kids giving together their own money was a really good thing to do. When we got married, I just wanted to like hand you all the finances, but we figured out like a budget, and it was really good to like designate this money is for God, and like you don't touch that just as much as you don't touch like the money for the power bill. This money is for God, and we got to make sure we always set that aside.
Yeah, and you were telling me earlier that Jonathan didn't really let you get away with being hands off with the money. What did he make you listen to for 5 hours?
Oh, we went to Edmonton, and the whole ride back we listened to Dave Ramsey. It's a podcast all about finances. So we got home and immediately made a budget and had everything all set out.
Good leadership, hubby. Well done. Well done. So there are some people who are listening today, and they're saying, well, this is really weird. I've never heard of anything like this in my life, like giving your money away, giving your money to a church. This just doesn't make sense to them. What would you say to people who didn't have the advantage you had? You watched 2 generations above you give. Both of you talked about watching your parents give. Those who haven't learned this yet, what would you say to them? Do you regret making this a priority?
Well, I would definitely say I don't regret it. I think it's actually had probably as big an impact on me as I have had on anyone else. Just being able to give your finances, and it changes your heart, because you have to be able to just appreciate what you have and appreciate what God has blessed you with, because our material blessings are from God, and we need to honor them with what we have, right? So
Yeah, so true. And I would challenge anybody who is listening to recognize there's a blessing that comes when the God who's given you everything, you take time to just bless him and honor him and give back to him. So, hey, guys, thank you. Thank you so much. Next week is Generosity Week here at the neighborhood. And we're just encouraging everyone to give. And we think it's important for the church culture to be a giving culture too. So next week, starting May 30th through to June 5th, when you give your offerings, we're responding to the call of the food bank here in Saskatoon. We feel a responsibility for this province and where we live. And we're going to take 10% of the offering that comes in next week, and we're going to give it to the food bank to bless the hungry and the hurting of our city, and just be there for them. Because just like individuals should give, churches need to give. So let's be generous next week. If you want to give in your offering this week, coming up on the screen right now, or the 4 ways you can give. You can mail a check in, drop by the church. We'll receive your giving that way too. On the very far corner is text to give. That's the best way to give if you want to give using a credit card. So text to give, especially for credit card giving. So thank you, Roger and Violet. Bless you. Thank you for joining us, Stephanie and Jonathan. So grateful to have you shared today. Thank you.